basic of things like getting washed, getting dressed, getting fed. Now, we've talked at length, haven't we, about how bad things are in social care. So we were expecting there to be maximum waits of days, weeks, months, but we found that in 7 councils, those maximum waits were over 6 months. Let me give you some more detail. Among the worst for delays, North Somerset, which admitted that they had one person with specialist needs waiting for 377 days, while in West Hertfordshire, the longest wait there was recorded as a whopping 259 days. And in the north of the country, in Kirklees, the maximum delay there was 181 days. Now, some of the councils said that in these instances, there were people with very specialist needs, for example, needing more than one carer. But as you can imagine, the human cost of that is therefore even greater. We had one viewer get in touch to say her mum had been stuck in hospital for 3 months while they waited for a care package to get underway, and another who said she'd had to give up work, everything else, to look after her mum in the time it took to get this care package started.
Robert was saying there that in his conversation with Mr Hodge of Surrey County Council, that the real trick was that the government does have future plans in mind. But what are councils telling you right now as they face yet another day of pressure? Right now, they tell us that they are desperately struggling to provide care for the growing number of people who need it. I spoke to one council leader in Yorkshire who told me that right now he is having to decide whether or not to turn on his streetlights or not, even to collect the rubbish unless something changes. This is what he had to say.
In this year's budget, we're spending £800,000 a week out of reserves to pay for social care.
How long will those reserves last at that rate?
At that rate, they won't last until after next September.
And then what do you do?
No one can tell us what we can do. The only thing we can do is just stop doing everything else.
It's a desperate situation. It is not limited to that council. We asked the government about this. We asked them 5 times to put a minister up. They wouldn't do that. They said they have put significant investment into social care. And although they admit these waits are regrettable, they say that that is working. However, the National Audit Office today said that that investment wasn't doing what it was needed to, and it wasn't keeping people out of hospitals. Instead, admissions are rising.
Rachel, thank you. Now, the days of chucking chalk at disruptive pupils are fortunately long since gone. But how do teachers in the 21st century confront disruptive behaviour in the classroom? Well, controversially, a number of schools are filming it on teacher body cameras to show the child, and indeed the parents, what he or she has done. It isn't the first time that body cameras have been used, but they are more often seen on police officers. One school in Essex, which is already trialling them in lunch breaks, spoke to us about the positives of using them.
It helps them do their job better. You know, it's not meant to be anything other than an aid. You know, technology is changing all the time. We're open to trialling new technology to see what impact they can have positively on the school. You know, and any school that makes that choice, they will obviously have to take whatever advice there, but it's about improving what goes on in schools, not necessarily about catching people doing things badly.
Well, to continue that discussion, I'm delighted to say that Anne-Marie O'Leary from NetsMum is here, and Tom Ellis, one of the researchers in the project, joins us from our studio in Portsmouth. Tom, be with you in just a moment. Anne-Marie, the introduction was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but what are you sensing from mums, particularly on behalf of their children, who face Mr. or Miss Teacher coming in now with a camera on their lapel?
Well, this has been a hotly discussed topic on NetMums this morning. Anything to do with schools and their child's education is a big deal. There is great sadness actually being expressed by mums about this. What does it mean about the state of the nation's classrooms if discipline is so poor that children's education is suffering and teachers themselves are feeling at risk from bad behaviour? We really need a thorough assessment here. Our class size is too big, or has our sense of discipline as a nation of a whole disappeared? Are children not learning at home what discipline really means and what it really needs to lead to?
Let me bring Tom in on precisely that point. In setting up this project, what care did you give to the concerns that some teachers have, that they're becoming big brother or big sister, and those civil rights of the children and indeed the mums and dads?
I mean, firstly, the setting up of the project was mainly done by the schools and by the company, but I mean, obviously, I've come in at the end of that process. As I understand it, and it was very similar with introducing the cameras into the police service, you have to set it up properly. You have to communicate to all of those involved what the purpose of the camera is. You have to make it clear, for instance, that the cameras aren't on all the time. They're incident specific. They're used for very specific purposes. I think once you get all that communication and clarity about the aims and uses of the camera in place, in this case, in the two schools that I know about, the teachers and the parents are very much on side.
Let me stay with you, Tom, just for one more on that. You mentioned the police, and one of the results of that research of using them, the trial, particularly in the Met, is that complaints have rocketed.
I think you have to be very careful how you interpret individual studies. There are many studies now, including in the United States, lots of random controlled trials, all showing different results. I think the problem is that method's been misapplied, and I think the issue is back to how you implement the cameras and if people are trained to use them. So you will get massive variation between schools and between individuals if that's not run well.
All right, Anne-Marie, picking up on Tom's point there about how you're not happy with what he said.
We need to remember that this is schools and classrooms we're talking about. Schools are not police stations. Children and teachers should be united in one aim, which is to educate children. This is not supposed to be an adversarial system pitting one against the other.
No, but 2/3 of all teachers polled by the Times Education Supplement said they think this would make them feel safer and would make the classroom a better place. That's the teachers themselves.
Exactly. We don't want anyone to feel unsafe, but we need to broaden out on this. If teachers are starting to feel unsafe in the classroom, and therefore necessarily children must be as well, then we need to address the wider issue, which is what is going wrong in our schools.
Time's beaten us. Tom, I hope you'll come back and talk to us about it again, and Anne-Marie as well. Thank you both very much indeed. So, do you think that it's necessary to use body cameras? You've been getting in touch with your thoughts on our Facebook page. You can join that debate and see what other folk have said. Just go to facebook.com/ITV News. Now, in other news, Rolf Harris has been cleared of 3 sex charges following a second trial. The former entertainer is currently in jail after being convicted in 2014 of 12 sex offences, one on a girl aged 7 or 8 years. The jury at Southwark Crown Court failed to return a verdict on 4 other counts. The fiancé of a children's author found murdered at their home has denied that he gave her sleeping pills months before she died. Ian Stewart's accused of secretly drugging Helen Bailey before killing her and hiding her body in the grounds of their home in Hertfordshire for her money. Richard Pallow was in court this morning. What more have you heard, Richard?
Well, we heard that Mr. Stewart was prescribed the sedative Zopiclone in the months before Miss Bailey's death because he wasn't sleeping. But he says that on the day that he got them, he decided he shouldn't take them and he gave them to Miss Bailey herself. He then claims that she took them after putting them in her medical bag because of her own anxieties. Now, traces of Zopiclone were found in the hair on Miss Bailey's body, which was then found 3 months after her disappearance in the house that they shared in Cambridgeshire. The prosecution alleged that she was drugged slowly over a few months. We also heard that a standing order from her account was changed on the day of her disappearance and up from £600 to £4,000. And only 2 people had the pins for that, Mr. Stewart and Miss Bailey. Mr. Stewart denies doing that and suggests that Miss Bailey did it on the day of her disappearance for redecorations. In an exchange with his barrister, Simon Russell Flint QC, he was asked, did you kill her for her money? He said, I didn't need any more money. I had more money than I could spend. She couldn't get it into her head that I didn't need any more money. He also said that they'd never had an argument in the 4 years that they had been together. Miss Bailey, he said, joked with him once that I don't know what would happen if we did. Mr. Stewart denies all the charges laid against him.
Richard, thank you. Still to come, goodbye to a pioneer of women's sport. The son of Rachel Heyhoe Flint celebrates her remarkable life. But first, later today, MPs will vote for the final time over whether to approve Britain's exit from the European Union. It's causing more rifts within the Labour Party. Its MPs have been ordered to back it, but several high-profile members of Jeremy Corbyn's front bench team remain opposed. And that will almost certainly mean that they will have to resign from their posts. Our political correspondent Emily Morgan with the latest.
Have you seen off the rebels, Prime Minister?
She certainly did yesterday, but make no mistake, today is a big day for Theresa May. The Brexit bill reaches its final stages in the House of Commons, and she'll be hoping to win a crucial vote on it later. It's this man now facing a potential revolt from his party. One member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet this morning refused to say whether he will obey his leader by voting for the bill.
Is it your intention to back your leader?
It's my intention to do what's right by my constituents and by my conscience and whatever that takes. And also I have to think about the wider Labour Party.
3 shadow cabinet ministers resigned last week after defying their leader. And one of Mr Corbyn's closest allies, Diane Abbott, missed the vote. All eyes then will be on whether she turns up tonight.
Do you personally think she should resign if she doesn't turn up?
I think a three-line whip in the Labour Party and all parties is very straightforward. It's a whip in favour of the party's position, and it's a whip that should be obeyed by the shadow cabinet.
Of most concern to the government today is how many of its MPs will vote for the rights of EU nationals living here to be guaranteed before negotiations start, something this Conservative feels is unnecessary.
If we want to achieve that in practical terms, the best way is to pass this bill through swiftly through the House of Commons and the House of Lords, trigger Article 50 and make sure it's the very first thing we get agreed with the EU.
There's little doubt the government will win this latest bout in the Commons. The bill will then head to the House of Lords for further scrutiny. The question is whether the Labour Party will emerge unscathed. Emily Morgan, ITV News in Westminster.
Next, a landmark court ruling which could affect millions of unmarried couples across the UK. Denise Brewster lived with her partner Lenny McMullen for 10 years. They owned their home together, but when he died, she wasn't automatically entitled to a share of his pension because they weren't married. Well, she challenged that, and today 5 Supreme Court justices unanimously decided that she can indeed receive payments under the pension scheme. Well, Gareth Mitchell is Denise's lawyer, and I'm delighted to say that he joins me now. She must be cock-a-hoop.
She's delighted. She's had a long battle. Her partner died in 2009. She's been battling through the court since 2011. And finally, the UK Supreme Court has reached a momentous decision, first time ever, deciding that there's been discrimination on the grounds of marital status.
Yeah. And she had another set of lawyers who looked after her when she was in Northern Ireland. You and your team took over when it came to the Supreme Court. Because this is of such significance, it had to be tested at Supreme Court level.
Absolutely.
As high as you can go.
Yes. So she won in the High Court in Northern Ireland and was delighted. But then there was an appeal. She lost in the Court of Appeal in Northern Ireland and then had to take it that stage further to the UK Supreme Court.
OK. She was a local government bodyguard. He was in the Transport Authority in Northern Ireland. Quite a few local government workers in England and Wales are already covered, but lots of others like police and what have you are not. Is this going to go to further legislation, further court cases, or is it a done deal for everybody?
Well, we don't know yet. So what we'd expect, though, all the other large public sector pension schemes, and there's about 12 million people in these pension schemes, we'd expect them, in light of this judgment, to remove the nomination form requirement. It doesn't directly mean, the consequence of the Supreme Court case doesn't directly mean that they have to do that. But the reasoning, the way the Supreme Court has approached it and analysed it, would seem to apply in exactly the same way to all these other pension schemes. So I think the most likely outcome of this is that they will remove it. And if they don't, I think they can expect further litigation to be run on similar lines.
And literally, in a nutshell, it was because it was about her human rights as not having to sign that one document.
Absolutely, yes. So
I like it when I say one word and you say it as well. Brilliant. Gareth Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us. Now, dipping into the red on your current bank account could cost you 7 times more than if you'd taken out a payday loan. Consumer group Which found that customers going £100 into an unauthorised overdraft for 30 days could be charged up to £180 compared to a £24 fee from a payday lender. Finally, mourners are gathering in Wolverhampton for the funeral of a pioneer of women's sport. Rachel Heyhoe Flint, who died last month, aged 77, was first trailblazer in cricket as captain for the England team that won the 1973 World Cup. She later became vice president of Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Ahead of today's service, her son Ben has been sharing his memories of a mother who really was one of a kind.
She was a lady who broke glass ceilings. She smashed through them because She just had a belief and a determination to get through that glass ceiling to a place where she felt was the right place to be. Getting the MCC to finally allow female members into the club. And I was there the day that it went through. This was the second or third time of asking that it had gone to a vote. And again, Mum's expectations were somewhat pessimistic, but she was there anyway. She wanted to be there just in case, and then clearly the vote went through. And how old would she have been? She'd have been 62 at the time, I think. And she leapt over the fence by the pub with a whoopee, and I couldn't keep up with her. She raced off through the Grace Gates to go and see whoever she could find to celebrate with. So, you know, that was a massive moment for a 213-year-old club as it stood at the time. You know, male only, 213 years. She managed to chip away at and then eventually get them to open their doors. She took on the cricketing world and, you know, just didn't let anything stand in her way. She just loved the sport and wanted and felt as if the girls had a right to be playing just as much as the men. And you know, she's now left the game in a healthy way. But you know, and there's some fun moments. I mean, I've seen a photograph of me being wheeled out in a pram onto in the middle of a cricket pitch, and I obviously can't remember that. So many people used to say, "God, Mum, you know, Mum's amazing." You know, even friends, dear friends from around Wolverhampton, they would say, "I didn't realise she did so much." And I guess I would always turn around and just say, "Well, she was just Mum to me. You know, she was great fun, and she was a very loving mum."
Ben Heyhoe Flint remembering a very loving mum, Rachel. That's it this lunchtime. Mary Nightingale will be here with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. But from all of us, bye-bye.